with this Wallpaper Method system, it was going to be up there with bullet journaling, with getting things done. It was going to be one of those amazing methods, productivity for ideas, for learning, for capturing notes, in an endless, well not endless, it's 10 meters, but a 10-meter scroll of ideas in time series. Elegant, unique, masterful. And I bet you can guess why it failed also. So this idea for the Wallpaper Method, it formed after a night of falling down a rabbit hole on the internet. A rabbit hole full of Victorian notebooks, big ledgers, notebooks, scrolls, giant sheets of paper. And I thought, what if I had a 10-meter scroll of wallpaper, thick, nice, easy to write on wallpaper, with ideas, thoughts, learning notes, insights, concepts, maybe a bit of journaling as well. But then, well, that's when the problem with this system, with this method, started. So the first problem was physics. You see, wallpaper, it doesn't want to stay rolled up, so I needed to secure the first end. With lots and lots of experimentation, I settled on 2 beams of wood. These are battens that you might use on a wall. And I sellotaped, glued, stapled the wallpaper to it. And it kind of worked. And the idea being that I use a bit of paper, I fold it up, and I keep going. And I unravel at the other end, and hey presto, it rolls on itself. Now, physics didn't seem to like me much, and trying to get these two things to stick together, I ended up with elastic bands on either end to hold those 2 pieces of wood. And I'll be honest, it wasn't very elegant. It's, yeah. I don't know whether you can hear the cat cleaning itself over there. Asleep all morning, and then as soon as I want to record a video, up, about, meowing, cleaning itself. So the next problem became taxonomy. So if I wrote a note here on meter 1, and then another one on meter 1.5, and then some learning notes here at the 2 meter mark, over here somewhere, how would I label them? How would I know what each note would become? So I created an elaborate, you might say confusing, taxonomy system to label the time and date, because this is a time series idea, an elegant time series. That's one of the things the Victorians used to do, was not necessarily separate notebooks, but a sort of time series, a mixture of notes and insights and journal records. That's what I wanted to create. But it became tricky. Where would I put it? How would I define it? I started using hashtags and various different pieces in this system, and it just felt complicated, really, really complicated. So then came the problem of storage and moving it around. I mean, it's not exactly the most portable of systems. It's not easy to store. I considered building a kind of rack system, I guess, where I could store it on there, because I had the idea of having multiple scrolls, and then I could wheel it to the side of the table, unravel it, put it back away and store it. But that felt a huge effort, let's put it that way. And so it just sort of rolled up and sat on the floor in the way. Yeah, there's a lot of problems with this system. Then came the problem of retrieval. Now imagine I'm on meter 15 and I want to find a note on meter 1. That's a lot of unraveling, a lot of busyness, a lot of chaos. So I ended up having to come up with a digital storage system to retrieve things easily. And so that meant taking a picture of each of the notes and then uploading them to Apple Notes, putting some tags in there so I could find them, acting essentially as a commonplace book, which is what I use Apple Notes for anyway. But the whole point of this was to capture notes and be able to find them again easily. And that tactile nature of a notebook, flicking through the serendipity that comes from it without the awkwardness of this system. Like many of my experiments and my creative pursuits here on Creative Soul Projects, this one failed. And here is why it failed, because the friction of the system was very high. But on the other side of that friction, the reward just wasn't there. It wasn't stacking up. High friction, low reward means I'm probably not going to keep using it. And the sweet spot for me is a system that has some friction, which is, using a notepad, using a pen, there's friction. It's harder to do that than it is to just capture notes on a phone or, dictate or even use AI to capture things easily. But on the other side of that friction of using paper and pen is a monumental reward for me. There's the retention of information when I write it in a notebook. I use paper as a thinking tool, as a place to explore ideas. Disconnecting from the internet and computers is a wonderful thing for me, and that's what paper allows me to do. Paper is tactile, it's got a feel to it, the way the pen moves across it. And then there's the serendipity that comes from flicking through old notebooks and finding ideas and lists and goals, and that reflection in that tactile, quiet space, not connected to a screen. That is the reward that sits on the other side of the friction when it comes to paper and pen. And this wallpaper method, although it sounded like a good idea, the friction is just too high. And on the other side of it, the rewards, they don't stack up. And yes, Helen, my co-host on Stationery Freaks, the podcast, did suggest that maybe the medium of wallpaper was the problem. The physics, the unraveling, the awkwardness of it. And that actually maybe I should use one of these, kids' arts scrolls or, an artist's roll of paper. Now there's a couple of things with that. The first is that paper tends to be quite thin, and I wanted a thick piece of paper to use Sharpies so that the writing is big and it looks elegant. More importantly, I had my tiny mind set on the fact that this was called the wallpaper method. The artist scroll method just doesn't quite have the same ring. Now there is something in this method. It's an idea that won't leave me alone. It keeps coming back. And I know from experience that when ideas don't leave you alone, that there's potentially something maturing in it. So with many of my ideas, I'm going to do the same thing with this wallpaper method. I'm going to park it. I'm going to let it mature and rumble away in the background. And who knows, maybe one day it will pop back, fully formed with another idea that is worth exploring. So in the meantime, I have around 40 meters of wallpaper to store in the house. I think my entire family is getting a little bit fed up with the amount of unfinished projects, random bits of paper and artwork, bits of wood. I'm going to add one more thing to that stack, and it is going to be the wallpaper method. I'll catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.